Welcome to the Madison Miller Podcast special edition show where I go over the 2023-24 National Hockey League national TV schedule. I was supposed to do this a couple weeks ago, but there was a lot of things that got in the way of that. We did this last year, and I always like to look back at the end of the year and look at which games I hyped up mattered and which ones didn't, and which games I tend to overlook sometimes. So, without further ado, here we go. So the season actually does begin technically on Saturday. It's the Global Series between the Kings and the Coyotes. It's on at midnight on the NHL Network. We're not going to come out with the NHL season predictions show until the week the season really gets the ball rolling when the Vegas Golden Knights have their Stanley Cup banner raising night and all that jazz. So Saturday at midnight, so technically tomorrow night, Kings Coyotes, 12 o'clock on NHL Network. So that's interesting. And the same thing for Saturday night, well, technically Sunday at midnight on NHL Network as well. So it's a little 2-game set thing. So that's that. And I'm trying to pull up there's a lot of neutral site hockey games, which is very interesting, but I'm trying to get it to where you can see like everything without like refreshing the next page and all that jazz. So the season starts Tuesday, October 10th. We have a triple header on ESPN. 5:30 it's Nashville at the Lightning. 8 o'clock on ESPN is Chicago at Pittsburgh. So Bedard at Crosby. Then 10:30 on ESPN, the Vegas Golden Knights have their banner raising against the Seattle Kraken. Good job by ESPN for getting Vegas in their opening night triple header. They probably threw Tampa in there thinking that they were going to potentially win the Cup. But here's the secret. They make the NHL schedule in June before the Stanley Cup final, or during the Stanley Cup final, because the schedule gets released at the end of June, around the time of the draft, but the national TV schedule isn't fully released until the end of August or early September. Like NBC used to do it in August, and now Turner and Disney do it in September. So Wednesday, October 11th, TNT doubleheader, Chicago at Boston and Colorado at LA. So Bedard at the team that won the President's Trophy a year ago, and then the Avs, who won the Cup 2 years ago, at LA. And then the other games on the 11th, Ottawa, Carolina, Montreal, Toronto, Winnipeg, Calgary, and Edmonton, Vancouver. So 3 Canadian teams have their home openers. And all the Canada teams play. So that's pretty neat. And then you have the original 6 matchup with Chicago and Boston. Thursday the 12th, you have Rangers at Buffalo, Philly at Columbus, Detroit at Jersey on ESPN Plus and Hulu, St. Louis at Dallas, Florida at Minnie, Seattle at Nashville, Vegas at San Jose. Friday the 13th, you have Arizona at New Jersey, and then ESPN Plus, Pittsburgh at the Capitals. On October 14th, you have Philly at Ottawa, Florida at Winnipeg, Nashville at Boston, Rangers at Columbus, Tampa at Detroit, Chicago at Montreal, Calgary at Pittsburgh, Minnesota at Toronto, Buffalo at the Islanders, Seattle at St. Louis, Vancouver at Edmonton, Colorado at San Jose, Anaheim at Vegas, and Carolina at the Kings. So, loaded Saturday. Looks like everybody's playing that day. And then Sunday the 15th, 2 games. 7 o'clock Tampa at Ottawa, and 8:30 Carolina at Anaheim. All right, so that was opening weekend. Now we're going to just do notable games that matter and national TV games. So Monday, October 16th, games of note. Florida at Jersey, Chicago at Toronto, Calgary, Washington are the games that really matter. Best game of the bunch is probably Florida at Jersey, but Calgary at Washington is somewhat interesting, and obviously Chicago at Toronto is very interesting. So it's Bedard at the Maple Leafs. Tuesday the 17th on ESPN, you have Tampa at Buffalo. And then the nightcap is Colorado at the Kraken. Other notable games, Vancouver at Philly, Edmonton at Nashville is okay. Kings at Winnipeg's not bad. Dallas at Vegas is a good one. That's a playoff rematch. Those two teams have had some history. The TNT game on October 18th is Pittsburgh at the Red Wings. The Red Wings just get favoritism year after year after year on the TV networks, and they haven't been good in almost a decade. Thursday, October 19th, good games. We have Calgary at Buffalo is an interesting game. Toronto at Florida is good. Nashville at the Rangers is good. Is that the Rangers home opener? No, it's not. It's against Arizona. The Rangers have a low-key easy schedule to start their season. I'm just coming to notice that. Arizona at home. At Buffalo is a place they always win. Nashville might take a step back. Who knows? ESPN Plus game is Edmonton at Philly. That game sucks. The Flyers are going to be terrible. The Kings at Minnesota should be the game on ESPN Plus and Hulu. Dallas Anaheim is somewhat interesting. Vegas Winnipeg's okay. And then on ESPN that night at 10:30 is Chicago at Colorado. That's Bedard at McKinnon. Friday, October 30th, only two games, Calgary at Columbus and Devils Isles. Devils Isles is the best game of the bunch. Saturday the 21st, notable games, Islanders at Buffalo, Vancouver at Florida, Toronto at Tampa, Vegas at Chicago is good, Philly, Dallas, San Jose, Nashville, Pittsburgh, St. Louis, Carolina, Colorado, Rangers at Seattle. That's a tough one for the Rangers, and then Boston has a tough one at LA. Sunday the 22nd, only two games, Calgary at Detroit and Boston, Anaheim. They always lighten the Sunday, the NHL does, especially during the football season because nobody's going to be watching. And then plus you have the baseball playoffs as well. And the only real conflict between would be Boston. Like if the Red Sox were to randomly sneak into the postseason and make a run, that'd be the only potential conflict between like fans of teams. And then the Angels aren't making the postseason, so there's no Anaheim conflict. Monday the 23rd, only one game, Montreal, Buffalo, two teams that are not very good. An odd time for ESPN on Tuesday, October 24th. It's Toronto at Washington. That's so weird. 6 o'clock Eastern on ESPN. Carolina at Tampa is a better game. That should have been in the ESPN spot. Dallas-Pittsburgh's a good game. There's a reason why all the games are sporadically different times. 6, 6:30, 6:45, 7, 7:15, 7:30, 7:45. There's a reason for that. The NBA did this last year. And one game started at a particular time. I don't know why hockey's doing that on the 24th. Colorado at the Islanders is a good game. ESPN 8:30 is Boston at Chicago. So Bedard hosting the Bruins. So both Boston and Chicago games are on national TV this year. But yeah, how bizarre is that? And then 11 o'clock on ESPN, you have Philly at Vegas. That game's terrible. Vegas is going to smoke them in that game. And then the TNT game on Wednesday, October 25th is Washington at the Devils. But yeah, I don't understand why they're doing the sporadic times thing in hockey. I know they did it in the NBA last year. I think the NBA was probably because of Election Day, the day prior to Election Day, but that's just bizarre. The 26th, the ESPN Plus Hulu game, Mini at Philly. So, again, the Flyers on ESPN Plus and Hulu, that's a mistake. Colorado-Pittsburgh's a better game. Seattle-Carolina's a better game. Also that night, Toronto at Dallas, St. Louis at Calgary, Rangers at Edmonton. Friday the 27th, Buffalo at Jersey could be interesting. Chicago, Vegas as a 6 p.m. start. So 3 o'clock Pacific. That's weird. A Vegas Friday matinee game. The NHL is doing some weird stuff this year, I swear. So Saturday the 28th. Notable games. Seattle, Florida is a good game. Toronto, Nashville. Vegas, Kings. Sunday the 29th. Colorado, Buffalo, Vegas. Minnesota, Jersey. San Jose, Washington. And then the Heritage Classic is Calgary at Edmonton at a neutral site. The 30th of October. Carolina, Phillies that night. Seattle, Tampa's good. Rangers, Winnipeg has potential. Blake Wheeler back in Winnipeg, by the way. That one. That's a stinky slate for the mischief night. So the best game is probably Seattle, Tampa Bay. On Halloween night on ESPN at 8 o'clock, it's Vegas at Toronto. And then the other game on Halloween is Nashville at Vancouver. The TNT game, actually we have a doubleheader on November 1st. Buffalo at Philly and St. Louis at Colorado. Dallas at Calgary is a better game than Buffalo at Philadelphia. Arizona, Anaheim's the other game. November 2nd, we have Florida at Detroit, Carolina at the Rangers, Islanders at Caps, ESPN Plus Hulu, we finally have a good one, Toronto at Boston, Jersey, Minnesota, Dallas, Edmonton, Nashville, Seattle's good, Winnipeg, Vegas could be good. Friday, November 3rd, only 2 games, Philly at Buffalo again, and then Devils at Blues. Saturday, November the 4th, Boston at Detroit's that night, Buffalo, Toronto, Isles host the the Hurricanes. I see Carolina and Florida right next to each other, so I automatically think Carolina Panthers. Oh well. Florida at Chicago, Rangers at Minnesota, Calgary, Seattle, Dallas, Vancouver. That's a playoff rematch, and then Colorado, Vegas. I mean playoff rematch from a few years ago. So Colorado, Vegas is the best game that night. That should be on national TV. Sunday the 5th, only 2 games. Jersey at Chicago, Vegas at Anaheim. So, Jack Hughes against Connor Bedard on November 5th. So, that's pretty cool. Monday, November 6th. Tampa, Toronto's a good game. Boston at Dallas is decent. Edmonton, Vancouver, rivalry game. November 7th on Election Day, we have a couple of games. Why is TNT a Tuesday that week? I don't understand that. One of the games is Detroit at the Rangers. But does ESPN have college basketball that night? And then November 8th, something must be going on. That's weird that TNT has hockey that night, not basketball. That's bizarre. Oh, I know why. Because the NBA's off on Election Day. That's Election Day. So that makes a lot of sense to why Turner decided to pick up hockey. And then ESPN's probably going to have on college basketball or Maction or something like that. And then the nightcap that night on TNT is Devils at Avs, and that's probably the best game on the board. November 8th, also TNT, we have another doubleheader. Florida, Washington, and Vegas hosting LA. Ottawa, Toronto's the other game. Thursday, November 9th, we have Isles at Boston, Minnesota at the Rangers, Chicago at Tampa, ESPN Plus and Hulu's Dallas, Columbus. That game sucks. Seattle, Colorado at 9. That's a good game. Pittsburgh Kings could be good. And then 10:30 on ESPN Plus and Hulu's Oilers, Sharks. That's going to be a high-scoring game, you would think. Friday, November 10th. Caps at Devils could be good. Carolina, Florida is an awesome game. Calgary, Toronto could be good. Saturday, November 11th, busy slate. Boston, Montreal's a rivalry game. Carolina, Tampa could be good. Caps at Isles. Buffalo at Pittsburgh. St. Louis at Colorado. Philly at the Kings. Edmonton, Seattle's an awesome game. Sunday, November 12th. Dallas and Minnesota is a good game. Chicago, Florida's pretty interesting. Monday the 13th, only 2 games. Isles at Edmonton and Colorado at Seattle. So those are really good games. Tuesday, November 14th. ESPN Plus and Hulu, Anaheim, Nashville. So regular ESPN doesn't have games because they carry college basketball at that point. And then 10:30 on ESPN Plus and Hulu, you have Florida at San Jose. Other games of note, Vegas and Washington, Boston, Buffalo, Devils, Jets. Wednesday, November 15th, the TNT doubleheader. Philly, Carolina, Isles, Vancouver. That's a crappy doubleheader. Seattle, Edmonton should have been the 10 o'clock game. Or they should have just had one game on TNT and make that 8 o'clock. Because that's a good game. The other 3 games are kind of stinky. I mean, they could have made Seattle, Edmonton 8, and then Isles, Vancouver 10:30 if Vancouver were to be a surprise team in 2023-24. So Isles, Vancouver could be good if Vancouver surprises this year, which I don't think so. I mean, I wouldn't think so right now, but if once the season gets closer with injuries and whatnot, you never know. We'll see with my predictions. I don't even know, but we'll see. All right, Thursday, November 16th, we have a neutral site game, Detroit and Ottawa. Jersey, Pittsburgh's that night. Tampa, Chicago on ESPN Plus and Hulu. Vancouver, Calgary, rivalry game. Florida at the Kings is good. Isles at the Kraken's good. Neutral site game, Toronto at Detroit at 2 o'clock. And then you have Buffalo, Winnipeg, and Florida, Anaheim. November 18th, that's a Saturday too. 11 a.m., you have Minnesota at Ottawa, neutral site game. Chicago at Nashville, Edmonton, Tampa. Montreal, Boston's a rivalry game. Pittsburgh, Carolina's could be good. Isles, Calgary. Rangers, Devils, the first one of the regular seasons that night. Colorado, Dallas. Seattle, Vancouver. Best game is probably Edmonton, Tampa Bay. Sunday, November 19th, the neutral site game, 8 a.m., so that must be in a different country. Toronto at Minnesota. And the rest of the slate that day is Columbus, Philly, Vegas, Pittsburgh, Buffalo, Chicago, and St. Louis, Anaheim. Best game is probably Vegas, Pittsburgh, although Buffalo, Chicago could be good. Monday, November 20th, you have Edmonton, Florida, which is good. Boston, Tampa's good. Rangers, Dallas is good. Colorado, Nashville's good. And Calgary, Seattle's good. The 2 games that are not so good are Kings, Arizona, and San Jose, Vancouver. November 21st, no games. The 22nd is the day before Thanksgiving. I feel like everybody plays that day. TNT, Boston, Florida, and Vegas, Dallas. Other notable games. Edmonton, Carolina, Rangers, Pittsburgh, Buffalo, Caps, Philly, Isles, Calgary, Nashville. And no games Thanksgiving. And on Black Friday, who has the Black Friday game on national TV? It is a primetime, or not a primetime game, but a 6 o'clock game between Pittsburgh and Buffalo. Don't forget there's an NFL game this year on Amazon Prime between the Jets and the Dolphins. And then an 8:30 game on TNT on Black Friday as well, Colorado, Minnesota. Every year, that Black Friday game used to be on NBC, and it would be Rangers at Boston or Rangers at Philly or Philly at Boston, Pittsburgh at Boston, Philly at Pittsburgh, like some combination of those teams. And then ABC had it a couple years ago, and now Turner has the Black Friday. And the rest of the games on Black Friday, Detroit at Boston, Rangers, Philly, Toronto, Chicago, Columbus, New Jersey, Nashville, St. Louis, Edmonton, Washington, Kings, Ducks, Montreal, San Jose, Isles, Ottawa, Tampa, Carolina, probably the best game so far I've seen on the docket for that day. Winnipeg, Florida, Calgary, Dallas is sneaky good, and Vancouver, Seattle. All right, Saturday the 25th of November, we have Boston, Rangers, Buffalo, Jersey, Toronto, Pittsburgh, Philly, Isles, Calgary, Colorado. And I just don't go over every game. I just go over notable games for the most part. But Black Friday, I did the whole board because it's Black Friday. And I think the NHL puts emphasis into that day. Like how the NBA puts emphasis into Martin Luther King Day. Sunday, November 26th. You have Minnesota, Detroit. St. Louis, Chicago, Columbus to Carolina, Winnipeg, Nashville, Anaheim, Edmonton. Best game on the board, Winnipeg, Nashville, although St. Louis, Chicago could be the most interesting game. Monday, November 27th, Tampa, Colorado, Vegas, Calgary, only 2 games on the board. Tuesday, November 28th, you have Isles, Devils, Florida, Toronto. ESPN Plus and Hulu is Carolina or at Philly. Pittsburgh, Nashville, St. Louis, Minnesota, Dallas, Winnipeg, Seattle, Chicago, Vegas, Edmonton. So that's a loaded slate for that day. The 29th of November, TNT, Red Wings, Rangers. So that's the second time that matchup is on TNT. And we've talked about earlier in the show how the Red Wings always get unnecessary favoritism by the TV networks. And they've stunk for a decade now. Is Caps Kings low-key a better game than Detroit Rangers? You can make that argument. Thursday, November 30th, the ESPN Plus and Hulu. We have Islanders Hurricanes. So that's a playoff rematch. Other games of note, Pittsburgh, Tampa, Seattle, Toronto, Minnesota, Nashville, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Dallas, Calgary. Friday, December 1st, only 2 games, Ottawa, Columbus, San Jose, New Jersey. On the 2nd of December, Tampa, Dallas, that's a decent game. That's a Stanley Cup rematch. Rangers, Nashville, Chicago, Winnipeg, Isles, Panthers, Philly, Pittsburgh, Boston, Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary, Washington, Vegas. So 2 Cup final rematches on the 2nd. So we have Tampa, Dallas in the matinee, and then Washington, Vegas at night. The best game on the board for the 2nd is probably Tampa, Dallas. Sunday, December 3rd, small window, Chicago, Minnesota, San Jose Rangers, Columbus, Boston, Nashville, Buffalo, Colorado Kings. Colorado Kings is probably the best game on the board, but people will say Chicago, Minnesota is probably the most interesting. December 4th, Pittsburgh at Phillies that day, Dallas at Tampa again. Carolina at Winnipeg, sneaky good. December 5th, not MSG. This team regularly plays on MSG. It's one of their teams, ESPN Plus and Hulu. It's the Sabres hosting the Red Wings. That's not a good game. Other games that night, Nashville, Chicago, Minnesota, Calgary, Jersey, Vancouver. Minnesota, Calgary is probably the best game that night. December 6th, the TNT doubleheader, Dallas at Florida and Carolina at Edmonton, 2 really good games. And then Pittsburgh, Tampa is a good non-national TV game. Vegas, St. Louis could be a sleeper, good game. So a nice slate for December 6th. All right, here's an ESPN game, 8 o'clock on December 7th, Dallas at Washington. And is it a doubleheader? Yes. Jersey at Seattle. The better game is the latter game. Other notable games, Buffalo, Boston, just a division rival. Toronto, Ottawa is a rival. Tampa, Nashville. Carolina, Calgary, sneaky good. Winnipeg, Colorado is good too. Friday, December 8th, Pittsburgh, Florida is a really good game. Minnesota, Edmonton is also a pretty good game. December 9th, that's a Saturday. Notable games, Jersey, Calgary, Vegas, Dallas, Rangers, Washington, Nashville, Toronto, Kings, Islanders, St. Louis, Chicago, Tampa, Seattle's awesome. And that's probably the best game on the board. Although Jersey, Calgary could be a sleeper in terms of good games. Sunday, December 10th, Jersey, Edmonton, Washington, Chicago, Kings, Rangers, Minnesota, Seattle. Jersey, Edmonton's probably the most fun game with Hughes and McDavid in that game. December 11th, not a lot of games. You have John Tavares back at the Islanders. That's always a fun one. Calgary, Colorado is an awesome game, so that's the best one. But the most fun one is probably Toronto at Isles because of JT. December 12th, ESPN doubleheader, 7:30 Detroit at St. Louis, 10 o'clock Chicago at Edmonton. Other games of note, Toronto Rangers, Florida, Seattle, Calgary, Vegas. I think Toronto Rangers should be the 7:30. Chicago, Edmonton, I get it. Or you make Chicago, Edmonton 8, and in Florida, Seattle 10:30. Because those are the best two games, probably. Although, Toronto Rangers is up there too. And Calgary, Vegas is an awesome game too. December 13th, TNT doubleheader, you have Boston, Jersey, and Buffalo, Colorado. The first game's the better game of the two, probably the best game on the board that day. December 14th, ESPN Plus and Hulu, you have Carolina, Detroit. Again with Detroit on national TV. Other notable games, Washington, Philly, Calgary, Minnesota, Tampa, Edmonton, Chicago, Seattle, Florida, Vancouver. Friday, December 13th, 7:30, ESPN Plus and Hulu. You have Nashville, Carolina. The Rangers have a surprising Friday night home game. They usually don't get Friday night home games. That's usually reserved for the Knicks. And then obviously the Jingle Ball is probably on the 8th this year. So that would make sense if neither Garden team had a home game. They're hosting Anaheim. Boston's at the Islanders. That's a good game. And that's probably the best game on the board, although you could argue Nashville, Carolina for that. Next up, December 16th. That's a Saturday. Notable games, Rangers at Boston, Detroit at Philly, Pittsburgh at Toronto, Colorado, Winnipeg, Washington, Nashville, Dallas, St. Louis, Tampa, Calgary, Florida, Edmonton, LA, Seattle. So some interesting games. Best game. Oh, and Vancouver, Minnesota's a 2 o'clock game. That's weird. So 1 o'clock Minnesota time. Best game on the slate is probably Tampa, Calgary. Sunday, December 17th, you have Washington, Carolina that day. And that's probably the best game on the board. Although Vancouver and Chicago exceed expectations, that could be a good one too. December 18th, you have Minnesota, Pittsburgh, Seattle, Dallas, Florida, Calgary, 2 or 3 really good games. I think the best one is Seattle, Dallas, although Florida, Calgary is good too. December 19th, ESPN Plus and Hulu, you have Edmonton at the Islanders and Kings at San Jose. Other games of note, Minnesota, Boston, Vegas, Carolina, Philly, Jersey, St. Louis, Tampa, Rangers, Toronto, Vancouver, Nashville, Colorado, Chicago. So that's a pretty good slate. Best game, though, is probably Vegas at Carolina. I'm surprised that's not on national TV. December 20th, TNT doubleheader, Isles, Caps, and Kraken, Kings. The other game on that night is Detroit, Winnipeg. So TNT got it right that time. December 21st, ESPN Plus and Hulu, Edmonton, New Jersey. So McDavid at Hughes. That's pretty fun. And 10:30 of Arizona at San Jose. So, notable games. Toronto, Buffalo. Nashville, Philly. Carolina, Pittsburgh. Vegas, Tampa. Vancouver, Dallas. And that's really it. Best game is probably Edmonton, Jersey. So ESPN Plus and Hulu got that right. Friday, December 27th, ESPN Plus and Hulu, Edmonton again, this time at MSG against the Rangers. That's a pretty good game and probably the best game on the board that night. Boston, Winnipeg's among notable games, and then an original 6 game between the Habs and the Blackhawks. So let's see how long the Christmas break is. They probably play on the 23rd, and they do. So Isles at Carolina that night, that's pretty good. Matinee game, Vegas, Florida. So Stanley Cup final rematch there. Boston at Mini. Tampa at Washington. Buffalo at the Rangers. So Rangers back-to-back home games. Calgary at Kings. So the best game on the board is probably Vegas, Florida. It's the final rematch. No games on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day or on the 26th. League resumes play on the 27th. So 7:30 on TNT, you have Boston at Buffalo, and then the other game on TNT that night. Oh, there is none. That's weird. Maybe they'll add San Jose Kings or Vegas Anaheim down the road. Other good games, other than those two I just mentioned for 10 o'clock, Vegas Rangers, or I'm sorry, not Vegas Rangers, Caps Rangers, Florida Tampa, Pittsburgh Isles, Carolina, Nashville, Dallas, St. Louis, and Seattle, Calgary. Seattle, Calgary is probably the best game. Thursday the 28th, there's no ESPN Plus and Hulu. Best game on the slate that night. The slate's weak. Probably Kings, Vegas. Friday, December 29th. Rangers, Florida. Caps, Isles. Philly, Seattle. What's the best game on the board? Probably Rangers, Florida. I feel like the Rangers always play Tampa and Florida the last couple days of December. Every year, the league puts the Rangers in Florida around New Year's and New Year's Eve. Every year. So that's very bizarre. That trend continues. And that's probably the best game on the board that night. And then on December 30th, the Saturday, you got Jersey at Boston, Rangers at Tampa. Yup, there you go. As I mentioned, they're always in Florida, Tampa, back-to-back, right around New Year's. Carolina, Toronto, Nashville, Washington, Edmonton, LA. Decent slate. Best game is probably Rangers, Tampa Bay. That's a conference finals rematch. Sunday, December 31st. No games on national TV. You have a matinee game, Winnipeg, Minnesota. Isles, Pittsburgh's on at 6. You have Chicago, Dallas that night. That's a really good game. Now, New Year's Day, from Seattle, you have the Kraken hosting the Golden Knights. I believe it's from T-Mobile Park in Seattle. Yes, it is. It's at the home of the Mariners as they host Vegas, so that is an awesome, awesome game. Tuesday, January 2nd on ESPN Plus and Hulu, it's Washington-Pittsburgh. And as tales as old as time's rivalry right there with Crosby and Ovechkin. And at 10:30, you have Toronto at the Kings. Other games of note, Carolina, the Rangers, awesome game. Calgary, Minnesota's good. Chicago, Tampa's good. Tampa, Winnipeg's good. Isles, Colorado's good. So a lot of good games that night. And then probably the best one is probably Carolina at the Rangers. Arguably the best two teams in, or at least two of the best three teams in that division. I don't know if they're the best two teams in the division because I think New Jersey has something to say about that. But two of the best 3 or 4 teams in that division for sure. And then Wednesday, January 3rd, 7:30 on TNT, you have Devils at Capitals. January 4th on ESPN at 7 o'clock, you have Pittsburgh at Boston. And that's it among ESPN games. Other games of note, you have Bedard at MSG, so that's pretty cool. Tampa, not Nashville. Calgary's at Nashville, Tampa's at Minnesota, Colorado's at Dallas. Those 3 8 o'clock games are awesome. Florida at Vegas is good too. That's a cup final rematch. Maybe they'll put that on ESPN. They should. And that's probably the best game on the board. Although Pittsburgh, Boston would generate the most ratings. Although Chicago Rangers might rate better than that because of Bedard and MSG and if the Rangers are good this year. So who knows? Friday, January 5th, you have Bedard at the Devils. So Bedard against Jack Hughes. Carolina at Washington's that night too. January 6th, you got, I bet you it's a weak slate because they're going to have NFL games. Obviously. You have Calgary, Philly, Florida, Colorado, Tampa, Boston, St. Louis, Carolina, Vancouver, Jersey, Toronto, San Jose, Nashville, Dallas, Isles, Vegas. Isles, Vegas is probably the best game on the board. No, Florida, Colorado's better. Sunday, January 7th, 4 games on the board. Best one is probably Calgary, Chicago. January 8th, best game on the board is probably Dallas and Minnesota. Oh, actually, no. Boston, Colorado's better. Dallas, Minnie's good, and then Philly hosting Pittsburgh, and then the other game is Rangers hosting Vancouver. And I think that's the night of the national title game. January 9th, ESPN Plus and Hulu, you have Edmonton, Chicago. So Bedard hosting McDavid. Seattle, Buffalo, LA, Tampa, Vancouver, Isles, Florida, St. Louis that night. Best game probably is Edmonton, Chicago, although LA, Tampa's good too. Wednesday, January 10th, the TNT doubleheader. Minnesota, Dallas, and Vegas, Colorado. Really awesome doubleheader. I love when Minnesota and Dallas play each other. That's always a fun game. January 11th, Edmonton, Detroit, LA, Florida, Vancouver, Pittsburgh, Jersey, Tampa, Seattle, Washington. ESPN that night is Toronto at the Islanders. So the John Tavares Bowl is on ESPN. They did that on purpose, let's face it. Chicago at Winnipeg's that night. Boston, Vegas is probably the best game on the board, though, because you have the Stanley Cup champions hosting the team that won the President's Trophy last year. That's always a fun game. Remember that one year it was Rangers at Chicago for the opener, and Chicago won the Cup and the Rangers won the President's Trophy? I always love to see the start the next year, the President's Trophy winners against the team that won the Cup. And we haven't seen a President's Trophy winner win the Cup in a long time. And that rarely ever happens anyway. Friday, January 12th, you have 2 games, Nashville, Dallas, Philly, Minnesota. The first game's better. January 13th, wild card weekend in the NFL. On ABC and ESPN Plus, the appetizer to the NFL playoffs. Rangers at Capitals. So the first ABC game of the year is a matchup we saw on ABC last year, and we saw the Capitals destroy the Rangers. That game was like 6-3 or something like that. In the end of February, I remember the Rangers, there was a lot of Patrick Kane rumors at the time, and somebody got injured from the Rangers, and it was a big deal, like Chris Kreider or Mika Zibanejad or Artemi Panarin. One of those guys got hurt last year. I forget who it was. And then, obviously, they go and trade for Kane literally the next week. Jersey, Florida is a better game than Rangers, Caps. So is Pittsburgh, Carolina, arguably. Colorado, Toronto is a good game, too. Dallas, Chicago's fun. Calgary, Vegas. So I just listed off a bunch of games that are arguably better than the Rangers-Caps game. My favorite game of that slate is probably Jersey, Florida, because I think that could be the Eastern Finals this year. And then Caps, Rangers at the Garden the next day, and as is original 6 game between the Red Wings and the Leafs. Martin Luther King Day, the league put a lot of games on there, and rightfully so, just like the NBA. Jersey, Boston's awesome. Minnesota's hosting the Islanders. That's a fun game. Carolina hosting the Kings is fun. Seattle at Pittsburgh, so Kraken at Crosby. Nashville, Vegas is fun as well. Tuesday, January 16th, ESPN Plus and Hulu, you have the Kings at the Stars. Kraken, Rangers is a fun game. Isles, Jets is fun. But the best game on the board is probably Toronto, Edmonton, right? You have Austin Matthews against Connor McDavid. Wednesday, January 17th, the TNT game is Chicago at Buffalo, so Bedard at Buffalo. And that's probably the best game on the board because the other 2 games are Montreal at Jersey and Detroit at Florida. Thursday, the 18th on ESPN Plus and Hulu, it's Minnesota at Tampa. Other games of note, Colorado, Boston, which is awesome. Toronto, Calgary, Seattle at Edmonton. On ESPN that night, you have Nashville at the Kings, which is fun. And then you have Rangers at Vegas. Best game on the board, it's either Minnesota, Tampa, or Seattle, Edmonton. Maybe Rangers, Vegas, but I'm going to say Seattle, Edmonton's the best game. That's the most fun. Friday the 19th of January, the best game on the board that night is probably Minnesota, Florida, although Isles at Connor Bedard's fun too. All right, Saturday the 20th of January, that is divisional round weekend in the NFL. Notable games, Tampa, Buffalo, Dallas, Jersey's fun. Toronto, Vancouver could be interesting. Canadian rivals there. Edmonton, Calgary's awesome. That's probably the best game on the board. Pittsburgh, Vegas is that weekend, as is Rangers, Kings. January 21st, that's a Sunday. Minnesota, Carolina's a good game. Dallas at the Islanders could be good. And Toronto, Seattle's awesome. The 22nd of January, you have Vegas, New Jersey. That's really fun. Florida, Nashville. So the Vegas Jersey game is the best game probably. Tuesday the 23rd, you have Tampa at Philly, Vegas at the Isles, Washington, Minnesota, St. Louis, Calgary. Best game on the board, probably Vegas at the Islanders. The 24th of January, the TNT doubleheader, Carolina, Boston, Chicago, Seattle. Decent doubleheader. Other games of note, Winnipeg, Toronto, Washington, Colorado. And the best game is definitely Carolina, Boston, although Chicago, Seattle is fun too. Thursday, January 25th on ESPN Plus and Hulu, we have Devils, Carolina, probably the best two teams in the Metro Division. That's a really, really fun game. And Nashville, Minnesota is a good game. Chicago, Edmonton's a good game, but that's hands down the best game on the board. Jersey, Carolina. So ESPN Plus and Hulu got that right. The 26th of January, Friday night on ESPN. Vegas, Rangers from the Garden. So that's a great game to put on ESPN. That's not surprising. That's a random Friday night Ranger home game on ESPN. That's something I wasn't expecting. If I'm not mistaken, I think the Knicks have a home game the next day on ABC, so that's kind of funny. Florida-Pittsburgh's a good game, too. That's that night. January 27th, that is a Saturday. So I'm assuming there's a matinee ABC game that day. We'll see. Unless if the NBA took it. Yeah, that's right. The NBA has that Knicks game, but I feel like there was a 1 o'clock spot open. I guess that's an ESP or an NBA game, too. January 27th, Washington, Dallas, Nashville, Edmonton, Boston, Phillies, a 12:30 game that day. Jersey, Tampa, Toronto, Winnipeg, Florida, Islanders, Chicago, Calgary is a sneaky good game. So the best game on the board that day is probably the Florida Islanders game. Although Chicago, Calgary is probably the most fun. And then January 28th, that is a Sunday, only 2 games. Kings, Blues, and Columbus, Seattle. Obviously, we have the AFC and the NFC championship games that day. Monday, January 29th, only 1 game, Nashville, Ottawa. Tuesday the 30th, only 2 games, Columbus, St. Louis, and Seattle, San Jose. Wednesday the 31st, only 1 TNT game, Kings and Preds. And then you have the All-Star break on the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th. So that's the weekend between the conference title games and the Super Bowl. So you obviously have a lot going on that weekend with hockey, and then you have the NFL Pro Bowl. So league resumes play on the 5th. You have Colorado Rangers and Isles at Toronto, both really good games. Better game is probably Avs Rangers. The 6th of February, you have Calgary Boston. ESPN Plus Hulu doubleheader, Colorado Jersey and Edmonton Vegas. Those are both excellent games. The better game is probably Edmonton Vegas. Although Colorado Jersey's fun, although I think Landeskog is out for this season, so that makes Colorado worse. So Edmonton Vegas is the better game. All right, the 7th of February, TNT doubleheader, Tampa Rangers, so Eastern Final rematch from 2 years ago, and then Minnesota Chicago. Dallas Toronto's the other game. That's pretty good. Thursday, February 8th on ESPN at 8 o'clock, you have Tampa Islanders. So that's a conference finals rematch from 3 years ago. Colorado, Carolina is probably the best game on the board, though. That probably should be the ESPN game. Calgary, Jersey's a fun one, too. Friday, February 9th, 3 games. Pittsburgh at Mini, Rangers at Chicago, and Edmonton at Anaheim. Best game of the 3 is probably Pittsburgh Mini, although Rangers-Chicago is probably the most fun. Chicago and the most fun's been a popular saying on the show so far. Saturday, February 10th, we have an ABC doubleheader. You have Blues Sabres and Capitals Bruins. The first game's just bad. They'll never put Calgary on ABC. They just won't do that. But again, Buffalo and St. Louis used to get favoritism on NBC. Now they're getting favoritism here on ABC. And I understand the Bruins, Capitals, they've had a lot of history against each other throughout the years. Jersey, Carolina probably should be on national TV. That's such a good game. And on ESPN Plus and Hulu, Seattle, Philly, Edmonton, LA is an awesome game too. Sunday, February 11th, St. Louis, Montreal, and Vancouver, Washington. Monday the 12th, good slate. Seattle, Jersey, Calgary Rangers, Arizona, Philly, and Minnesota, Vegas. So one of those games is not like the other three. Best game, though, is Seattle, Jersey, hands down. Tuesday the 13th, Tampa, Boston, awesome game. Colorado, Washington's decent. Seattle, Isles is fun. Carolina, Dallas is fun. Jersey, Nashville's fun. Vancouver, Chicago could be fun. Valentine's Day, February 14th, the game that got picked, Florida at Pittsburgh on TNT. February 15th, Seattle at Boston, LA at Jersey. Colorado, Tampa is probably the best game. Pittsburgh, Chicago's fun. ESPN that night is Dallas, Nashville, which is a fun one too. One game on February 16th, Carolina at Arizona. February 17th, 3 o'clock on ABC of Edmonton, Dallas. Saturday prime time, a neutral site game. The Stadium Series, Flyers, Devils. And that is probably, that's at MetLife Stadium. So that makes sense, the way that game's on ABC. Carolina, Vegas is a good game. And then Rangers at Islanders on ABC at MetLife Stadium as well. Yet again, the Rangers get favoritism because they're the road team playing at MetLife Stadium. So, of course, they're going to put the Islanders and the Devils as the home teams, just like they did at Yankee Stadium and they did at Citi Field and made the Sabres the freaking home team because the Rangers need 41 home games at Madison Square Garden because it's Madison Square Garden. So the league always does the Rangers favors. President's Day on the 19th, you have a lot of matinee games. Oh, ESPN has some games. How about that? Toronto, St. Louis, Detroit, Seattle. Some matinee hockey on ESPN on President's Day. That's a lot of fun. That's new. Dallas, Boston is a better game than both of those games. Winnipeg, Calgary is probably a better game than those as well. Chicago, Carolina is fun. The 20th of February, that's a Tuesday. Best game on the board that night. Dallas Rangers maybe Isles Pittsburgh, Jersey Caps, Nashville Vegas. I'd say it's Dallas Rangers. February 21st, TNT doubleheader, Flyers Blackhawks, Boston Edmonton. The latter game's the better game. Thursday, February 22nd on ESPN that night is Caps Lightning. Rangers Devils is that night. That probably should be the game over that one because that was a playoff rematch. We also have Boston, Calgary, ESPN Plus and Hulu. That night is Nashville and the Kings. And Toronto, Vegas is an awesome game too. Boston, Calgary is a good one. Friday the 23rd, you have Minnesota, Edmonton that night. The 24th of February, probably some ABC games. Yes, 12 o'clock, St. Louis, Detroit. ESPN Plus and Hulu, Rangers, Flyers. Tampa, Isles is that day. Dallas, Carolina is that day. Washington, Florida. Toronto, Colorado. Calgary, Edmonton. So some good games there. TNT doubleheader on Sunday, February 25th. Bolts, Devils. Flyers, Pens. Also that night, Carolina, Buffalo. Is that the best game that's not on TV? The Tampa, Jersey's a great game. February 26th. We'll see. The best game of that bunch is Boston at Seattle on Tuesday the 27th. 7 o'clock on ESPN Plus and Hulu. Buffalo, Florida. Vegas, Toronto's a fun one that day. Carolina, Minnesota. Kings, Calgary, Dallas, Colorado. 9:30 ESPN Plus and Hulu. 8:30 TNT, St. Louis, Edmonton. So Thursday the 29th, so it's a leap year. How about that? Carolina, Columbus is ESPN Plus Hulu. Vegas, Boston's a better game, though. On ESPN TV, you have Colorado, Chicago, Pittsburgh, Seattle. Friday, March 1st, best game on the board is probably Jersey, Anaheim because of all the youngsters, and then obviously the Devils. We're running out of time for the show, so we'll just do national TV games and such, and best game on the board. So, Minnesota, March 2nd, at St. Louis, ESPN Plus and ABC. ESPN Plus and Hulu is Vegas, Buffalo, Rangers, Toronto. Sunday, March 3rd, TNT, 3:30, Jersey, Kings. Monday, March 4th, ESPN Plus and Hulu, St. Louis, Philly. Florida Rangers is that night too. ESPN Plus, Hulu, March 5th. Edmonton, Boston. TNT doubleheader, Wednesday, March 6th. Buffalo, Toronto, and Detroit, Colorado. ESPN game, March 7th. You have St. Louis at the Devils. Toronto, Boston's that night too. March 8th. Best game on the board is Minnesota at Colorado. So the 9th, 3 o'clock on ABC, ESPN Plus, Pittsburgh, Boston. 12 o'clock or 12:30 ESPN Plus and Hulu's Edmonton and Buffalo. St. Louis Rangers is that night. Detroit, Vegas. Doubleheader on TNT on March 10th. I think that's Selection Sunday. Edmonton, Pittsburgh, and Nashville, Minnesota is the TNT doubleheader that night. Monday, March 11th, best game on the board is definitely Devils at Rangers. March 12th, I don't see any national games. Best game on the board, Rangers at Carolina is good. Colorado, Calgary, Vegas, Seattle. Vegas, Seattle's the best one. March 13th, TNT doubleheader, Kings, Blues, and Edmonton hosting Washington. Thursday, March 14th, ESPN Plus and Hulu, Isles, Sabres. Best game, though, on the board. That's a hard one. Jersey, Dallas, Vegas, Calgary, Washington, Seattle, all in the mix. I'd say Vegas, Calgary, although I love Jersey, Dallas, too. Friday, the 15th of March, only Anaheim, Winnipeg, and Vegas, LA at Chicago. Saturday, the 16th of March, we have, I think that's the first weekend of the round of 32. That's a, here's an interesting state. Oh, here's a game we haven't seen all, on the list yet. ABC, 3 o'clock, Rangers, Pens. And then ESPN Plus and Hulu that evening is Tampa at Florida. Colorado, Edmonton's probably the best game on the board, though. Doubleheader on TNT on the 17th on St. Patrick's Day. Isles, Rangers, and Vegas hosting New Jersey. The second game's the better game to me. Monday, March 18th, only 2 games. Washington, Calgary, Buffalo, Seattle. Tuesday, March 19th, 7:30 ESPN Plus and Hulu, Carolina at the Islanders. Pittsburgh, Jersey's a great game. ESPN Plus and Hulu that night, too, is Minnesota, Anaheim. Tampa, Vegas, probably the best game, though. March 20th, Toronto, Washington, and Minnesota, LA is the doubleheader on TNT. The other game's Arizona, Dallas. Thursday, March 21st, ESPN Plus, Hulu, Nashville, Florida. Rangers, Boston's a good game that night. ESPN, though, that night is Seattle at Vegas for the second time this year on ESPN, so that's funny. Or I should say this season. Tampa's at San Jose. Florida is hosting Nashville. Friday, March 22nd, Pittsburgh, Dallas is that night. Carolina at Washington. Those are the 2 good games. The 23rd of March. How about this? Saturday primetime, 8 o'clock, ABC. Panthers, Rangers from the Garden. Great game. Great choice by ESPN there. Edmonton, Toronto's an awesome game, too. And then on the 24th, the Sunday, 2 o'clock TNT, Pittsburgh, Colorado. So also that day is Toronto at Carolina. Monday, the 25th, only 2 games, Vegas, St. Louis, and LA, Vancouver. Tuesday, the 26th, ESPN Plus and Hulu, he has Devils at Toronto. Flyers, Rangers, Boston, Florida, Carolina, Pittsburgh, Detroit, Washington, Vegas, Nashville, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Calgary, Chicago, and Anaheim, Seattle's that night as well. 7:30 TNT on the 27th of March, Boston, Tampa, good game. The 28th of March, ESPN Plus and Hulu, Detroit at Carolina. Best game on the board is probably Rangers at Colorado. Friday the 29th is Jersey at Sabres. The 30th, 2:30 on ESPN, you have Vegas, Minnesota. You have Nashville, Colorado that same night. Isles, Tampa's a good game. Dallas, Seattle. Only 1 game on the 31st on TNT at 3:30, Anaheim, Vancouver. Monday, April 1st, I think that's the national title game. So it's Pittsburgh, Rangers that night. Florida, Toronto is probably the best game on the board, though. Tuesday, April 2nd, best game on the board is probably Pittsburgh, Jersey, although Chicago Islanders is fun. Boston, Nashville's fun, too. Wednesday, April 3rd, TNT doubleheader. Devils, Rangers, Seattle, Kings. Good doubleheader. Edmonton, Dallas, and Tampa, Toronto are also really good games. Thursday, April 4th, ESPN Plus and Hulu doubleheader. St. Louis, Nashville, and LA, San Jose. Pittsburgh, Washington's that night, too, and that's not on national TV. That's an absolute shocker. Boston, Carolina's the best game, though, on the board that night. April 5th, you have Vegas at Arizona. That's probably the worst game on the board. Washington, Carolina's probably the best. Actually, no, Colorado, Edmonton. And then Saturday, April 6th, you have ABC doubleheader. Tampa, Pittsburgh, Florida, Boston. Edmonton, Calgary's that night as well. 1 o'clock TNT. On Sunday, April 7th, you have Buffalo at Detroit. And then 10 o'clock on ESPN that night, Dallas, Colorado. Really good game there. Nothing else really that fun. Nashville, Jersey's that night too. Monday, April 8th, Pittsburgh, Toronto, Vegas, Vancouver. Tuesday, April 9th, 7 o'clock ESPN, Washington, Detroit, Carolina, Boston. Rangers, Isles, Toronto, Jersey's good. 9:30 ESPN, Minnesota, Colorado. Wednesday, April 10th, 8:30 on TNT, Vegas, Edmonton. ESPN Plus Hulu on the 11th is Columbus and Florida. Toronto hosting Jersey is probably a better game. Rangers hosting Flyers that night too. Calgary at the Kings is fun too. Friday, April 12th, probably one of the last days of the regular season. Nashville, Chicago is a fun game. Minnesota, Vegas is probably the best game. Saturday, April 13th, 12:30 ABC. Isles at the Rangers, 3 o'clock ABC, Seattle, Dallas. And then Saturday primetime is Boston at Pittsburgh. So that's a fun Saturday primetime game. Tampa, Washington's that same night as well. Sunday the 14th, 1 o'clock TNT, Seattle, St. Louis, and then 3:30 TNT, Colorado, Vegas. Monday the 15th, ESPN 9:30, Minnesota at LA. Boston, Washington's that night too, so it's Nashville, Pittsburgh, and Isles at the Devils. Tuesday the 16th, 7:30 on ESPN, Toronto, Florida, 10 o'clock ESPN Plus and Hulu, Chicago, Vegas. Wednesday the 17th, TNT doubleheader, Pittsburgh, Isles, and St. Louis, Dallas. Toronto, Tampa's that night too. ESPN doubleheader on the 18th, Seattle, Minnesota, Edmonton, Colorado. I'm surprised the regular season is going this late. And the end of the regular season is Thursday, April 18th. So that day's probably going to be one of the play-in tournament games in the NBA. All right, so there you have it for the 2023-24 NHL National TV schedule. So we'll look back on this in a year from now or maybe in the summer and see how we were right and wrong about some of these games.